The hall was so elegant that even the air seemed expensive. James entered with hesitant steps, wearing the only suit he could afford to buy at a Bronx thrift store. The sleeves were a little short. His shoes hurt. But none of that mattered. This was the night he would finally see his wife shine, and he would be proud to say, "She's mine." He searched for Rachel among the guests. When he found her, his heart smiled. She was surrounded by colleagues, men in tailored suits, women with jewelry that cost more than his car. But he went anyway. He moved closer. He touched her shoulder lightly. She turned slowly, looked into his face, and for a second, her eyes froze. But then she laughed, as if she were uncomfortable. "I'm sorry," she said, in a sweet, treacherous voice. "I think you're confusing me with someone else." The people around laughed. James stood there, bewildered. "Rachel, it's me. I'm your husband." The silence fell like a bomb. One of the company's partners looked at Rachel and let out a mocking laugh. "You attract all sorts of strange characters, huh?" Rachel forced a smile, turned to her colleagues and said, as if sweeping the dirt under the rug, "I swear I have no idea who he is." Everyone laughed. Someone filmed it. James felt his face burning. A heat rose behind his eyes. He wanted to speak, to shout, to show a picture. But his hands trembled so much that he could barely hold the wine glass. Rachel had already turned back to the group. It was as if it had never existed. And at that moment, on Christmas Day, in front of dozens of people, James died inside. But what nobody knew, not even her, that's because on that same night, someone would come in through that door. And when that happened, her world would never be the same again. "Do you still want to go to the company dinner? I managed to get an extra invitation." He paused for a second, staring at the screen as if it were a miracle. To want. He had been dreaming about that for years. Rachel worked at one of the largest law firms in New York. While he changed oil in used cars at a cramped garage in Queens, she climbed the ranks, rising in salary and status. Things weren't going well. The marriage had become a silent agreement, without kisses, without good mornings, without plans. But still, he loved her. James replied with a simple yes and stared at his phone, waiting for an emoji, a smiley face, a little heart. Nothing came, just bubbles of silence. Even so, his chest swelled. In the following days, James spent entire nights watching YouTube videos, how to behave at corporate events, 10 mistakes you can't make at formal dinners, how to impress rich people without seeming desperate. He washed the only suit he owned, bought a new tie at the corner thrift store, and even tried to polish his old shoes with shoe cream borrowed from his boss. On the day of the event, he carefully shaved his beard and used the cologne he saved for special occasions, the same one he wore to his wedding. Before leaving, he stopped in front of the mirror and looked at himself. He didn't look like a rich man, but he looked like an honest man, and deep down, he hoped that still meant something. Upon arriving at the company building, he was stopped by a security guard who asked for identification. James gave his wife's name. "Rachel Turner works here." The security guard checked the list, looked doubtful, and finally reluctantly allowed him entry. James went up in a mirrored elevator, fixing his hair with a trembling hand. When the doors opened, he was confronted with a world that was not his own. Red carpets, crystal chandeliers, waiters in white gloves, people greeting each other with air kisses, clinking glasses, loud, fake laughter. James took a deep breath. He looked for Rachel among the guests. There she was, in a burgundy dress, her hair up, a sparkling necklace around her neck, as beautiful as the day they got married. And for a moment, James believed that everything would be all right, that she would introduce him with pride, that she would say, "This is my husband. He supported me when I was nothing." But what was to come? it would be the worst night of his life. That was, without a doubt, the most humiliating night of his life, but it was also the beginning of a justice that no one expected. Where are you watching this story from? Comment below with the name of your city or country. I want to see how far this story goes, and if this storyline moved. You subscribe to the channel right now. That week, James lived between the workshop and his dreams. Every night he would lie in bed imagining what it would be like to walk hand in hand with Rachel in that luxurious ballroom, meet her colleagues, laugh at their sophisticated jokes, maybe even dance to a slow song at the end of the night. But there was a nagging voice in his mind, a persistent whisper that said, "You don't belong here." He ignored it. He countered with faith. She invited me. She remembered me. Maybe there's still something between us. During the days that followed, he went above and beyond to prepare. She bought an etiquette book at a used bookstore and read it while waiting for clients. She memorized wine names, learned to distinguish silverware in photos, and practiced smiling without seeming insecure. He spent an hour rehearsing how he would introduce himself to her colleagues. "Hi, I'm James, Rachel's husband." "James, nice to meet you. I work with Rachel in the corporate law department." He smiled, imagining that scene. She laughed proudly, saying, "That's James. He means everything to me." But she hadn't said that in a long time. In the apartment where they lived, Rachel hardly spoke. She left early and returned late. She slept facing the other side of the bed. Sometimes he thought she'd been gone for months. Only her body remained. On the eve of the event, James picked up his suit and tried to disguise how tight it was in the chest. The trousers didn't fit well. The soles of his shoes were worn out, but he smiled at himself in the mirror as if everything was perfect. "She'll see me there. She'll remember who I am, where we came from." On his way to the event inside the subway, he watched the well-dressed couples heading to parties. Some were kissing, others were laughing. He went alone. Rachel had said she would be there earlier, sorting things out with the partners. James arrived at the building and went up slowly. With each floor, I felt my heart beat faster. And no matter how hard she tried to convince herself that everything would be all right, there was something in the air. Something told him that the night wouldn't end as he expected. He just didn't imagine that in a few minutes he would have his soul ripped open in public for the only person he still believed he loved. The elevator doors opened with an elegant, icy ding. James took a hesitant step into the hall. The first impact was visual. Silk curtains, golden lights reflecting on glass walls, floral arrangements that looked like living sculptures. The floor shone like a mirror. And him? He carried on his shoulders the weight of a world to which he never belonged. A waiter walked by, offering champagne. James took the glass and almost dropped it. The tray didn't even budge. The waiter didn't even look at him. It was as if he were invisible. He looked around, searching for Rachel. There were dozens of people talking, laughing, touching each other. Like old elite friends. The laughter sounded loud, fake, distant. He continued walking slowly, trying to appear natural, as if he knew where he was, as if he knew who he was. But I didn't know. Every glance that met his seemed to assess him. The disheveled suit, the home-cut hair, the scratched shoes. He saw the judgment in their eyes. And then he saw her. Rachel, radiant. The burgundy dress hugged her body elegantly. Her hair was perfectly styled in an updo. Her makeup was light and sophisticated. She was standing next to a tall, gray-haired man who seemed fascinated by everything she said. Two other colleagues were laughing along. She spoke confidently with her hands. It was like watching an actress on stage. James smiled, a pure smile, out of pride, of love, of hope. He went to her, each step a mental rehearsal. You'll see. Everything will be all right. She'll turn around, smile and say, "That's James, my husband." It came close. He placed his hand on her shoulder. She turned around. Her eyes recognized him for less than a second, but then something changed. Rachel frowned slightly, as if he were seeing a stranger. "I'm sorry," she said in a sweet, friendly voice. "I think you're confusing me with someone else." Silence. One of his colleagues looked surprised. The gray-haired man gave a restrained laugh. "Rachel, it's me," James said, his voice faltering. "It's James." She widened her eyes, feigning confusion, and she repeated, now louder, "I swear, I've never seen you in my life." The laughter began. Low points at the beginning, then stronger. Another colleague scoffed. "Who invited the catering delivery person?" James stayed there, stopped, static. The world is crumbling from within. She turned around and started laughing with her colleagues again, and he was left alone, with the trembling glass in his hand and his shattered heart on the floor. If you were James, what would you do after this public humiliation? Would you have the courage to stay in the salon, or would you leave right away? Write your answer in the comments. I read them all, and if you were already chilled by this story, like the video and subscribe to the channel. There's still a lot more to come. James felt his own soul sinking like a leaky ship in the open sea. The laughter still echoed behind him. It was as if the sound was stuck in his ear, swirling, mocking, hurting. He took 2 steps back. He looked around. No one intervened. No one asked if he was all right. People simply looked away, as if an unease had invaded the atmosphere, and that unease was him. The waiter who was passing by offered another glass, but upon seeing James's condition, he turned away without saying a word. Not even the party organizer wanted to face his pain. James retreated to a side wall. He found a corner near a golden pillar and leaned against it, trying to compose himself. But how can a man recover when he has just been erased from his own life? She pretended he didn't exist. And no one there doubted it. He took his cell phone out of his pocket. Trembling, he opened the photo gallery. There she was, at birthdays, at weddings, on the couch, in the rain, laughing with him. How can anyone forget all of this? His heart was begging for explanations. From afar, he saw Rachel smile again, as if nothing had happened. A toast was made. She raised her glass elegantly, while the gray-haired man whispered something in her ear. And there, at the back of that hall, James discovered a new kind of pain, a pain without screams, without blood, a silent pain, but devastating. He looked at his shoes. They were dirty. His suit was wrinkled. His glass was almost empty. Her world was made of gold. His was made of dust. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that she was ashamed of him. Shame on the man who cleaned the house, who cooked while she studied for her exams. Shame on the man who sold his car to pay half of her first month's rent in Manhattan. Shame on the man who believed that love could withstand even ambition. James ran a hand over his face. He took a deep breath. He swallowed his tears. But one stubborn tear escaped. He didn't wipe it away. He let it fall. It was all he could still control. It was at that moment that he felt a touch on his shoulder. He turned slowly, and he saw a familiar face that he hadn't expected to see there. A man he hadn't seen in years. A man who would change everything that night. And for the first time since. He arrived. Someone looked at him with respect. The room still vibrated with background music and clinking glasses. But for James, everything was in slow motion. While he was trying to process what had just happened, Rachel's words echoed like stab wounds. "I've never seen you in my life." He remained still, as if his presence there could still be justified, as if the world around him would wake up and say, "Okay, that's gone too far." But no, reality hit harder. On the other side of the room, a Group of company employees were watching the scene. One of them commented loudly enough for James to hear. That was hilarious. The woman sent a "Who are you?" message to her own stalker. More laughter. Another, with a glass of whiskey in his hand, joked about his suit. "I bet that guy's an extra in a 90s Christmas movie." Everyone burst into laughter. Rachel didn't laugh, but she didn't stop either. She didn't deny it. She didn't come closer. She simply drank from the glass, raised an eyebrow, and turned her back, like someone slamming the front door in a stranger's face. James tried to say something. His mouth opened, but no words came out. His chest ached, as if he couldn't breathe. The sound seemed muffled, as if he were underwater. He was the husband, and now it was just the butt of the joke. More people approached the circle of mockery. The group grew larger, and so did the laughter. Someone even discreetly pulled out their cell phone and started filming. James saw the red light flashing. He tried to leave, but his legs were heavy. Every step hurt. With each meter, shame seemed to grow like a shadow behind him. She went to the nearest side table, put down her nearly empty glass, and lowered her head. She didn't know whether to cry, scream, or simply disappear. At that moment, a woman from the company walked past him and murmured, "I don't know who you are, but you should leave. You're embarrassing yourself." That shattered what little was left. It was no longer just his wife's rejection. It was a collective trial, public mockery, the cruel laughter of those who never knew who he was, but decided he didn't deserve to be there. James clenched his fists. His face burned. His pride bled. But before he left, a new presence entered the room. Silent, elegant, with an energy that changed the atmosphere instantly. Everyone stopped for a second. Rachel glanced over her shoulder, and when James turned around, his eyes widened. It was someone from the past, someone he had saved, and now he would save him. Have you ever been humiliated by someone you loved? Share your experience in the comments, or simply write, "I've felt this before," if the pain is overwhelming. James dragged himself to the darkest corner of the room, near a side table where no one would notice him. There, among the wilting flower arrangements and a nearly empty ice bucket, he finally gave in. His hand trembled, his breath caught in his throat. The world seemed to spin. How do you breathe again after being knocked out by the person you gave everything to? His mind fired off images as if it were an out-of-control projector. Rachel was crying on the floor of the studio apartment, saying she would never pass the bar exam. He hugged her, saying, "You'll make it, and I'll be there." Rachel is sick and has no money for medicine. He was selling the bicycle he used to get to work. He was walking there for 2 weeks during the winter. Rachel smiled as she held the letter of acceptance from the firm. He was preparing a candlelit dinner with frozen food and cheap wine. All of this to now be treated as a stranger, an annoyance, a joke. He cowered in the corner. No one else was looking. No one was asking. James had become the kind of man the rich don't see, the kind of presence that is bothersome, which exposes a truth that no one there wants to face. The success of many is built upon the silence and sacrifice of the invisible. Someone walked by with a tray. James didn't take anything. He had such a lump in his throat that not even water could get it down. Your phone vibrated. It was a notification. Instagram. Rachel posted a photo. She's smiling with the caption, "Perfect night with amazing people. Grateful for every connection that 2025 brought me." The same woman who ignored him. That destroyed it. Now he was collecting likes as if he were a ghost. James froze. He felt shame, pain. But right there, in that moment, he began to feel something else. Anger, not those people, not from the salon. That's it. The woman he helped lift up noon and who was now elegantly burying him alive. And it was at that exact moment, when he thought nothing could get worse, that he heard a voice behind him. "James?" He turned around, startled. There, standing before him, was an elegant man with grey hair, a steady gaze, and a smile of recognition. "I can't believe it. It's you, James." James frowned, trying to recognize him. The man touched his shoulder. "Respectfully, you saved me years ago, at the lake. You pulled me out of there. I never forgot you." James blinked, confused. The world around him seemed frozen. That man, he was the new CEO of the firm, and she was looking at James as if he were the most important thing in that room. "Do you believe in divine justice? Comment below. You reap what you sow." James stared at the man before him as if he were a ghost from the past. His eyes were teary, his chest tight, still trying to understand. If this was real, or just another trap of the cruel night. "You," he whispered, his voice still faltering. The man smiled, a genuine smile, the smile of someone who feels true gratitude. "I am William Harper. But perhaps you remember me as the father of the girl you saved at Lake Harrison 7 years ago." James froze. The images returned in seconds. That afternoon, the car half sunk in the ice, a little girl screaming, him jumping without thinking, burying the door open with his hands, pulling the girl out while everyone just watched, panicked. And then, silence. He never heard from them again. "You disappeared," William continued. "I tried to find you, but you refused any reward. You just said, 'I didn't do it for money. I never forgot.'" James looked at his own feet, trying to contain his emotion. The first person to look at him that night did so with respect. "I work here now," William said, laughing. "I just took over as CEO, first company party, and I almost left. Before seeing you, good thing I stayed." While they were talking, a small group began to notice their interaction. Who is that man with Mr. Harper? Wasn't he the weirdo at the entrance? James was still trying to process everything when William touched his shoulder again. "You need to come with me. Please come. I want to introduce you to the board." James hesitated. "William, I think it's not a good time. My wife." "Your wife?" William looked at him strangely. James nodded toward the center of the room. Rachel, still laughing, still pretending. William frowned. "That one over there? Rachel Turner?" "Yes." William looked at her, then at James, and his expression changed. "The woman who ignored you is the same one who presents herself as the perfect wife in the company's internal reports. Interesting." He took a deep breath and said firmly, "Come with me. This story is about to change." James hesitated for a final second. But then he continued, as they walked side by side. Across the hall as equals, their gazes began to change, whispers, confusion, and then Rachel looked toward the movement. When her eyes met James's, he was standing next to the new CEO. Her world stopped. The hall was no longer the same. The noise of forced laughter and artificial toasts began to dissipate, as if a greater presence had taken over the atmosphere. James walked alongside William Harper, the newly appointed CEO, the most powerful man in that company, and felt all eyes fixed on him, like never before. But now, it wasn't with contempt. I was hesitant, with discomfort, scared. Rachel saw them approaching and her eyes widened. A smile slipped from her face like ink staining a canvas. "William," she said, trying to sound natural, "what a surprise. You already knew my—" She hesitated. "Friend." The CEO looked at her for a second. Then he looked at James. And then, loud enough for the group around him to hear, he said, "Your friend. He told me that he is her husband." Silence. Total silence. Rachel swallowed hard. The glass in her hand trembled slightly. "Well, technically," she began, "we've had our differences. It's complicated." William raised his hand, cutting off the conversation. No, it's not complicated. What's complicated is you pretending you don't know the man who saved my daughter's life. The people around stopped pretending they weren't listening. That man, William continued, turning to those present, jumped into a frozen lake to pull my daughter from a sinking car. He almost died in that water, and when I tried to thank him, he refused anything. Everyone heard, everyone saw. Rachel was pale. And today, William continued, I find him here, huddled in a corner, treated like trash. And who did this? You? Rachel tried to explain herself. I thought it was a joke, William. A misunderstanding. I got nervous. There were so many people. No, he interrupted, now more serious. What you did wasn't nervousness. It was contempt. And that says much more about you than about him. Rachel tried to compose herself, but it was too late. The silence around her said it all. James stood motionless, as if still stuck to the ground. But inside, something was beginning to sprout, a seed of strength and of justice. William looked at him again. Are you still working at that garage in Queens? James nodded, almost voicelessly. Not anymore. Starting tomorrow, I want you here. I have a vacancy for someone like you. Loyal, discreet, courageous, a real person. A small round of applause began to emerge, not forced, genuine. And for the first time that night, James was seen for who he truly was. Have you ever seen your life change in seconds? He comments, the truth always comes out. The atmosphere in the room had changed completely. Before, James was the invisible man. Now he was the center of attention. But for the first time, attentions of respect, surprise, and regret. Rachel was still standing there, her smile frozen, and her eyes trembling. Her makeup was still flawless, but her face devastated inside. William stepped forward and spoke firmly. Everyone here knows my name, but not everyone knows my story. I owe my life, and my daughter's, to this man. He pointed at James. Today, many of you laughed at him, you despised him, you judged him. But a man's character isn't in the suit he wears. It's in the decisions he makes when no one is watching. The silence was total. Even the DJ turned the music down. James wanted to disappear, but now for a different reason. He was no longer ashamed. I was emotional, overloaded. Rachel tried again. William, please. This is all a misunderstanding. I never meant to. Rachel, William interrupted, his tone now icy. If you had told me you were married to him, perhaps I would have understood the tension. But you lied. Not only to me, but to yourself. The group around them began to disperse, uncomfortable. Rachel was alone. James, on the other hand, was no longer there. William turned to him. Can I ask you something? James nodded. Don't let someone's disdain dim the greatness you possess. You are the kind of person this company needs. James looked around. He saw faces that had once mocked him now staring at the ground. He saw fake smiles melting away. He saw a woman who had once been his world, now reduced to the emptiness she herself had created. And then he took a deep breath. He straightened his shoulders, and for the first time that night, she smiled. If that twist gave you goosebumps, watch this video now. This support makes all the difference in enabling more people to receive this story. And if you haven't signed up yet, now is the time. James's journey isn't over yet. The room began to stir again, but no one could ignore what had just happened. It was as if the air was denser, heavier, laden with tension and shame hanging in the air. James was about to leave alongside William when he felt a surge in his chest. Something that needed to come out, not out of anger, but out of dignity. He stopped. He turned around slowly, Rachel was still there, alone, trying to appear composed, but her gaze was already trembling. The pose of an unwavering woman had crumbled. James took 2 steps back. The crowd silently parted. "Rachel," he said, his voice calm but sharp, "you didn't recognize me today." She tried to open her mouth, but he raised his hand. "You looked me in the eyes and erased me. You treated me like a mistake, like a nuisance. You pretended not to know who I was." Rachel lowered her eyes. James continued, "But you knew, and even so, you killed me right there, standing up. And do you know why?" Now he was speaking to everyone. "Because I'm the part of your story you're ashamed to remember. The real part, the dirty part, the part that doesn't go with high heels and corporate smiles." He took a deep breath and added, "But I'm also the part that believed in you when no one else did, that fed you when you had nothing to eat, that hugged you when everything was falling apart." He stared intently at her. "And you know what's worse than being betrayed? It's being forgotten by someone you never forgot." Rachel had tears in her eyes. She tried to speak. "James, I didn't know how." But he interrupted her, not angrily, truthfully. "You didn't delete me by accident. You erased me because you wanted to rise without carrying the guilt of those who helped you get up. But today, you fell. And it wasn't because I knocked you down. It was because the lie you created couldn't sustain you." The room remained silent. Rachel was crying. James gave one last look, without hatred, without resentment, just free. He turned and walked towards the exit alongside William. The two were greeted with discreet smiles and silent greetings. A simple man who left the event with his head held high and a clear conscience. If this moment made you want to give a standing ovation, like this video now and share it with someone who needs to hear this truth. Rachel stood in the middle of the hall like a statue cracked from the inside. The makeup could no longer hide her red eyes. James's words still echoed like hammer blows in her head. But the worst part wasn't what he said. That's what people were thinking. The colleagues, once so helpful, were now whispering behind glasses of sparkling wine. She said she was single, right? And was she really her husband? This is going to cause problems up there. Rachel tried to compose herself. She smoothed her dress, straightened her posture, forced a smile. She looked for someone to lean on, but no one else wanted to be seen next to her. A woman from HR walked by and looked away. A partner at the firm raised his eyebrows and turned his face away. Even the gray-haired man she had been talking to earlier now avoided eye contact. The mask was slipping, and there was nowhere left to hide the shame. William was still watching from a distance. He discreetly called the human resources manager over and whispered something in his ear. Rachel realized. She walked quickly towards William, her tone somewhere between desperation and arrogance. "William, we need to talk. I think all of this is getting out of control. It was just a misunderstanding and Rachel." He cut her off firmly. "The only thing that got out of control was your humanity." She tried to maintain her composure, but her voice faltered. "I built my career here. I gave everything for this. Affirm, you know that." "And James, what did he give you?" William asked directly. Rachel was speechless. William moved a little closer and spoke softly but firmly. "You used silence as a weapon. You despised someone who helped you get this far. It's not just a matter of marriage, Rachel. It's a matter of character. And here, we don't reward deceit." Rachel blinked as if she hadn't heard correctly. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm telling you that. Starting tomorrow, there will be a formal review of your ethical conduct, and I expect you to be ready to face the mirror without a mask." She took a step back. Her heel faltered. What had once been a symbol of power was now a shattered suit of armor. Rachel, who earlier in the evening had been the center of attention, was now merely an echo of what she had pretended to be. The truth, at last, was laid bare, and it hurt. Those who live by appearances will one day be unmasked. The silence in the hall was thick, almost sacred. James, standing still at the edge of that luxurious setting, now carried something that cannot be bought: respect earned through suffering. While Rachel was falling apart socially, he, the ignored, humiliated, invisible man, now walked with the serenity of someone who doesn't need to shout to be heard. William Harper, the CEO, stood by his side like a shield of prestige, but the strength emanating from James came from elsewhere, from within. He took a deep breath and glanced around one last time. Every detail of that room had been designed to exclude men like him. The oppressive glint, the calculated glances, the toasts laden with arrogance. But now, the atmosphere was disconcerted. The expressions confused, the certainties cracked. And then William turned to him. "James, do you want to say something before you go?" James hesitated, not out of fear, but because he knew that, from that moment on, everything he said would be remembered. He took a step forward. Everyone stopped to listen. "I came in here tonight believing this would be the worst place for someone like me." The voice was firm. There was no anger. There was clarity. And for a while, it was. I was ignored by the person I loved most in my life. I was ridiculed by people who didn't even know my name. I was treated like nothing. He paused, but then I realized the problem was never with me. The problem was what you value here. Some looked away. Others swallowed hard. They value image, status, appearance, resume, and they forget the essentials: character, integrity, truth. He looked directly at Rachel. "You could have destroyed me, and you almost did, but today, I thank you." Rachel frowned, confused. He continued, "Thank you for showing me who you really are. Before it was too late, you freed me from the illusion I was still living in." A woman from the firm, previously impassive, let out a discreet nod. James then turned to William. "And to you, William, thank you for reminding me that justice still exists in this world, that the good we do comes back to us, that the silence of a true act can shout louder than 1,000 false words." William placed his hand on her shoulder, in a gesture of recognition that made any contract unnecessary. "You honor this company more than many who have worked here for decades," the CEO replied. James smiled, a slight smile, almost shy. But there, in that room full of paper giants, that smile was the only real thing. He then started walking towards the exit, and that's when something unexpected happened. One of the waiters, the same one who had ignored him earlier in the evening, put down his tray, went over to him, and said, "Lord, forgive me. I was just like them." James stopped. He looked at the boy and said simply, "You can still choose to be different." He went on his way. As he passed through the entrance, the security guard, the same one who hesitated to let him in, made a respectful gesture with his head. James returned the look with a firm gaze. Without superiority, just with humanity. With each step toward the exit, James was leaving behind not just a hall, but a life. She was leaving behind a version of herself that she hoped would be approved, who was begging for recognition, who loved someone who no longer existed. In the building's lobby, William caught up with him. "James, before you go, I want to make you a proposition." He handed her an envelope. "Here are the terms. You can start in January as the company's director of social projects. The role is yours, if you want it." James picked up the envelope. He read it. Silence. Then he looked at William. You know what surprises me most about all this? What? I came here thinking I'd leave ashamed, but I'm leaving, with my head held high and with a future. William smiled. Life is full of twists and turns, and some of them are beautiful to watch. James turned around, and as he stepped through the glass doors of the main entrance, felt the icy New York air hit his face. Like a rebirth. Outside, the snow was beginning to fall, but he didn't feel cold. For the first time in a long time, he was whole. As I walked along the wet sidewalk, a message vibrated on my cell phone. It was Rachel's. I'm sorry. Can we talk? James looked for a moment, then he blocked the number, and he moved on without looking back. If you felt every step of that triumphant exit, like this video now and write in the comments. Those who possess the truth are never defeated. A week had passed since the Christmas dinner. New York remained the same on the outside, frenetic, gray, noisy. But for James, everything had changed on the inside. He still woke up early, but no longer to catch the crowded subway to the workshop. Now he drank his coffee calmly. He read the newspaper. He thought. On Monday, he arrived at the company headquarters with a different kind of nervousness. That of rebuilding. He was wearing a new suit, a gift from William. But more than that, he was wearing a new man. A man who had bled inside in front of everyone and survived. The receptionist greeted him with a genuine smile. Good morning, Mr. Walker. Welcome. Senor Walker. He was no longer the stranger at the entrance. He was no longer the husband nobody knew. Now, he had a name, a face, and respect. The position was simple but symbolic. Director of Social Projects, the mission to create inclusion programs, scholarships, and community initiatives. James didn't just work there now. He was the bridge between worlds that rarely met, and he understood better than anyone what it meant to be on the outside looking in. On the third day, as he walked down the hallway, he heard colleagues murmuring, "It's him, the one from the party." But there was no mockery. There was admiration, a certain shame too, the shame of those who judged wrongly, of those who failed to see. Rachel hadn't been seen since the event. She was, they said, under internal evaluation. Her name disappeared from emails, meetings and plaques. The silence surrounding her was louder than any scandal. James didn't feel anger. He felt pity. She had built everything on an image, and images break. He, on the other hand, built himself upon the truth. On Friday of that week, William called him into the room. "Sit down, James, I want to show you something." He turned on the TV in the meeting room. It was a live broadcast of a new community program the company was running in partnership with public schools in the Bronx. The logo, Project Root, inspired by James's story, created based on his ideas. "You started this," William said, "and you're already changing lives." James didn't answer immediately. His emotional face spoke louder than any words. He remembered every sleepless night, every lunch skipped to pay bills, every tear swallowed. Now, all of that was bearing fruit. At the end of the day, as he went down to the street, he saw a familiar figure on the other side of the sidewalk. Rachel. No heels, no makeup, no glitter. She crossed the street, she walked slowly. She stopped in front of him. There was no crowd, there was no audience, just the two of them. "James," she said, her voice weak, "I needed to see you." He just waited. "I was awful, I know. I erased you as if you were a mistake in my life. But in reality, you were the only real thing I had. And I threw it away." James looked at her. Her eyes were sincere, but tired. There was no more arrogance, only ruin. "I don't want you." To forgive me now, she continued. I just wanted you to know that I never stopped loving you, but I loved the idea of winning more, and that won me over inside. James took a deep breath. I believed in you until the very last minute. Even when everyone said I wasn't good enough, I said you were amazing. She cried, silently. But today, I understand you didn't betray me at dinner. You betrayed me long before, when you decided I was a burden, when you started to be ashamed of our history. Rachel lowered her eyes. I lost you, didn't I? James smiled sadly. You lost yourself. I finally found myself. He took a step back. He looked at her tenderly, but without weakness. Take care of yourself, Rachel. He turned around. He walked. And this time, he was the one who left her behind. Days later, he sat down to write a text that the company published on its official page. The title, The Value of Being Invisible. In the text, he recounted, without naming names, the night he was silenced by the person he loved most, and how that taught him something the world needs to hear. Being seen isn't always a sign of worth. Sometimes, true value lies in remaining standing even when no one sees you. Because at some point, who you are screams so loudly that the world bends down to listen. The post went viral, thousands of likes. Comments from men and women saying, "This story is mine too." James became a symbol, not of fame, but of resilience. And so, the man who started the night like no one else ended the year as an example to follow. Not because of the rise, but because of not getting lost when falling. If this story touched you, if you felt every pain, every overcoming, every comeback, enjoy this video now. Comment below, "I saw James inside me," and share it with someone who needs to know. If you stayed until the end, it's because this story spoke to something deep inside you. Thank you for listening, for feeling, for walking with James on this journey. And it doesn't stop there. There's another story waiting for you.